Hi again, Mark here from Talking Bass. Today we're going to look at some simple bass practice that you can employ for working on almost all areas of your bass playing and musicianship. We're going to work on learning the notes of the fretboard, your harmony knowledge, your tone, your general note choice and your repertoire. We're going to do this in a very relaxed and simple way by improvising bass lines on a jazz ballad from a basic chord sheet. For this lesson we'll use one of the most popular jazz songs of all time, Misty by Erroll Garner. The lesson material for this video can all be found over at the Talkingbass website. There's a backing track to practice along to and a chord chart to follow. Also remember to like and give me a comment on the video, then subscribe and hit the bell for notifications on weekly bass lessons. Then if you want to take things further, sign up to the free membership over at the website to gain access to a ton of free practice materials, downloads and a huge community of over 100,000 other bass players all chilling in the forums, groups and live hangs. Hit the link below and I'll see you there. Okay, first things first, we're going to be improvising a simple bass line through the chords of Misty. So here's the basic chord chart. The tune's in the key of E flat, and to get started, I'll just play a bass line along to the backing track so you can follow along with the changes and see what we're working with. So I mentioned that playing through ballads can be great practice, but that sounds like a pretty simple bass line. So what's the catch? You know, what kind of special sauce do we get from a tune like Misty? Well, for one thing, we're practicing slowly. I've recorded this track at 60 beats per minute, so you get to think while you're improvising the bass part in a very laid-back way. You don't have to deal with the pressure that you might have improvising a walking bass line at 250 beats per minute. Also, it's still a jazz tune. We're improvising the bass part. We're creating a part we feel in the moment through a jazz chord progression. We've got some interesting harmony in there, and we get to make use of our harmony knowledge and vocabulary in weaving a line through the chords. So you're going to learn about the chord progression itself. You'll need to know the chord tones for every chord. You'll need to know the appropriate scales, how to make use of chromatic notes, and how to make choices when it comes to register or fretboard positioning. Also, because you're reading from a chord chart, you're going to be locating those root notes and chord tones on the fretboard. So you get to test and work on your fretboard knowledge. Again, it's in a very slow, relaxed way while still making music. So let's start with the most simple of exercises. Let's just play root notes. This is going to be the most basic of exercises, but also the most valuable when it comes to working on your fretboard knowledge. We're going to do this in stages. For the first exercise, we're going to stick to a position within the first 5 or 6 frets. You can try this without the track to begin with if you feel that your fretboard knowledge is too lacking. Just find those notes in that area and hold each one for the duration of the chord. So without the track, we could just work through like this. We see the chord chart there, we look at the first chord, it's an E flat major 7, so we're looking for an E flat. So in that first position there's an E flat at the first fret of the D string. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we have the B flat minor 7, so we look for a B flat. Where have we got a B flat? There it is, first fret of the A string. Then an E flat 7, again first fret of the D string. Then 2 beats each of those, and then A flat major 7. Where's there an A flat? Well, we've got a choice. We can either play the A flat down here at the 4th fret of the E string, or the A flat up here at the 1st fret of the G string. 2, 3, 4, and then we're into A flat minor 7 and D flat 7. So A flat minor 7 there, 4th fret of the E string, and then the D flat is there at the 4th fret of the A string. So that's the exercise here. We're just trying to stay in this low position, playing the notes as low as we can there. And we can use open strings if we want as well. It's just that there aren't that many of them because we've got a bunch of flats. So when we get to the A eventually for the A minor 7, you could use the open A string, or you could use the 5th fret of the E string, or you could use that 2nd fret of the G string. It's completely down to you. You know, you're improvising this, you're making choices, okay? So I'll just work through the first 8 bars there in time. So we could play E flat, 1, 2, 3, 4. B flat, 2, E flat, 4, A flat, 2, 3, 4, A flat, 2, 3, 4, E flat, 2, C, then F, and B flat, and G minor 7, C, F, B flat. So we're just finding those root notes there in that first position. So then for a little bit more pressure testing, we can try with the track. So again, I'll just try the first 8 bars. 3, 4. So you can see how already this can be good for working on the notes of the neck, because you're being tested. You're translating the music from the sheet to the fretboard. So this is why sight reading or reading music is good for working on the notes on the fretboard. You know, that's the best way, but this, looking at chord charts, is a good second best. So once you've tried out that first area there, we can move up to another area. So this time we're going to move up into this area up here, this no man's land. So if we see the first position there as E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, okay, all those natural notes there, we can then shift a full position up here so that we're starting with the first finger on the 7th fret there, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, okay? So that's going to be our general position. And obviously we're dealing with flats, so we can move down to the 6th fret for those. So we've got the B flat down here, E flat, A flat, and D flat. And you can move up a little bit so that you can take the E flat here, A flat, D flat, and G flat. So, you know, we can move a little bit within that position. But, you know, we're just revolving around that general 7th to 10th fret area. So again, you want to try this without the track. So let's say look at the first chord there, E flat. So we might try 6th fret A string. 3, 4, B flat. Where have we got a B flat? Okay, well we've got one here at the 6th fret of the E string. Then for the E flat, we can come back. Then for the A flat, we have a choice. We could either play the A flat all the way up there, or we can play it here at the 6th fret of the D string. Then A flat again, and then to the D flat. So for D flat, we could take it here at the 9th fret of the E string, or there at the 6th fret of the G string. Then back to E flat. Then C is there, 8th fret of the E string. F at the 8th fret of the A string. B flat, 8th fret of the D string, and then G. We can move to the 10th fret of the A string, then the C, then the F, and the B flat. So you can see how it's all in this general area. Now, obviously, you don't want to memorize this as a bass line. We're looking for those notes there. We're constantly testing ourselves so that we're, improvising the line instead of just memorizing a line. So each time you're seeing the note on there, the E flat, thinking, where's there an E flat? Which is why it's good to do it without the track to begin with. You've got to have that period of, I don't know where it is, I'm going to have to find it. And then the second time you come to it, so after the E flat, you find the B flat, okay. Now we're going to be looking for an E flat again. Okay, I know we're just on the E flat. You cement that position there of the 6th fret on the A string. So you're always returning to it. That's my go-to for the E flat. And down here, that's my go-to for the E flat. And if I was right up here, that'd be the go-to for the E flat. So we're basing our choices of which fret to use for a particular note on the position that we're in. Okay, now let's try it with the track. E flat, look ahead. E flat, up to the E flat, look ahead to that A flat, plan where you're going. Maybe move up to the D flat, down to the C, up to the F, up to the B flat, maybe down to the G, maybe right up to the F. Okay, now let's just try something a little extreme, just to work on those notes a little bit more. So this time we'll work on the notes from the 11th fret and upward, okay? Now it's worth mentioning that that position from the 12th fret and up is exactly the same as it is down here. So remember, 12th fret is the same notes as the open string. So when we had the notes here, E, F, G, A, same up here, E, F, G, A. Look at those fret markers. B, C, D, B, C, D, E, F, G, E, F, G, A, B, C. Revolves around those fret markers in exactly the same way. And because we're up here and we've got those four notes there at the 12th fret that we had on the open string, we can actually use the fret below, the 11th fret, to get the flats. So instead of always being up here for the E flat, we can actually play the E flat there at the 11th fret, okay? So again, you want to try this without the track, but I'll just skip ahead and let's just try it with the track. And obviously, this is going to sound quite high. B flat, plan ahead, A flat, A flat up to the D flat, maybe higher E flat, C, F, up to the B flat, G, very high, C, up to the F, maybe up to the B flat. Okay. Now, obviously, some of those notes are going to be a little bit high for your average regular bass line, but it's still worth knowing all the notes. And that's not to say that you won't play up here, because as we'll see in a second, some of these notes up here are actually bassier than these notes down here. Now, as one more position exercise, you could also try shifting between the positions. So we start in that low position, stay there for a while, then maybe move up into the next position, hang around for a little while, you come down, maybe come back up, maybe come up a little bit more, down. Just try shifting through the positions. So let's try that with the track. So I'm here in this low position. Let's transition up to the A flat. I've already got used to playing in this area, so maybe move down to the D flat. All around in this area. And the G. Maybe move all the way up here. D flat and... Okay. So you can shift between those areas, hanging around in one area for a while and focusing on areas that you don't feel comfortable with. If you feel like you don't know the notes as well on the D and the G strings, stick to those, practice those. Don't rely on the notes that you know. Always try and push yourself to catch the notes that you don't know so well. And then once you get into that area and think, oh no, I don't know where I am, then you can just bring yourself back down for a while, back into a safe area, and then move up again. You just extending that map each time. Okay, now let's try being even more restrictive in the practice and try sticking to a single string. Now this is really going to force you into learning those notes on the neck and shifting position at every point. So we might start with just using the E string. Okay, so if we're just going to use the E string, and we look at those notes there, again, we're not using chord tones or anything like that, just root notes. We'll look at the E flat there. Let's find an E flat on the E string. Okay, we've got the one there at the 11th fret, so we're in that kind of middle ground position. B flat, where we're going to go, okay, well, we could come down here, down to this B flat, then back up to the E flat, then down to the A flat there, always sticking with the E string, up to the D flat, and then E flat, and then down to C, down to the F, and then up to B flat. Then G, up to the C, down to the F, and to the B flat. Okay? So this really helps with learning the notes on the neck, and some of you that have seen a lot of my lessons will recognize this kind of restrictive practice that I do working through the cycle of fourths on each string. So this is just another way of doing that, you know, working through a chord chart on a jazz standard. So let's just have a listen to that with the track, and have a listen to the tone, because we'll come back to that in a minute. B flat, back to E flat, down to the A flat. Try and hold it there as long as you can. A flat, up to the D flat, down to the C, maybe up to the F, down to the B flat, G, C, F, B flat, and back to the E flat, and so on. So you want to try this with each string. E string, A string, D string, G string. If you've got a 5 string, you can use the B string as well. So I'll just try the A string just to give you an indication of how that might sound, but you also want to try on the D string and G string as well. So here's with the A string. There's the E flat, B flat, E flat. Where's the A flat gonna be? Okay, so you'll recognize it the next time you're there. A flat and the D flat, E flat, and now to the C, to the F, now to a B flat. Where's there a G? To the C, F, maybe try up to the B flat. Okay. One extra advantage to this practice is that you really get to hear how each individual string sounds from a tonal perspective. For example, the higher notes on the E and A string, like this E flat here, at the 11th fret of the E string, is going to sound warmer and deeper than the same note down here on the D string. Okay? So it's a bit of a cliche when players talk about that lower area in the first five frets as being where the money is, you know, that's the money area, as if the upper areas are only intended, you know, for fills and solos. But bass notes like that E flat have way more depth to them up here on the E string or A string than, you know, than down here at the first fret of the D string. You know, if I was to play the, let's say the C, there at the 5th fret of the G string, it sounds way better up here, as, you know, in terms of a bass note, on the A string. Same pitch, just on a thicker, fatter string. Hear how much warmer that is. So that's the first few exercises that you can try and working through a ballad like this. The next step is to start adding some interest to the bass line. We're going to look at adding some extra notes into the mix rather than just those basic root notes. So the first thing that you want to do is look at adding some chord tones. These are the notes of the chord, the root, the 3rd, the 5th, the 7th, or, you know, whatever notes there might be in there. Chord tones should always be the first step in creating melodic interest in a bass line because the chord tones are there in the chord. So you're going to need to work on your chord tones and learning the arpeggios of all the chords in the piece. Now, learning all the principles of chord construction is way outside the scope of this lesson. If you want to learn about chords, you can watch some of my other lessons on YouTube, which I'll link to below, or for the ultimate deep dive, you can try the Chord Tone Essentials course over at the website. You'll learn the construction principles for pretty much every chord that you're ever going to see on any chord chart ever. how to map those notes all over the bass, and then how to apply them in your bass lines, your fills, and your solos in any style. So again, I'll link to the course in the info below. So for this lesson, I'm just going to work through each chord in turn, playing the appropriate arpeggio. That's our set of chord tones. This is where jazz standards like this are great practice for working on harmony, because you get to play with chord progressions that you're less likely to see in pop or rock styles. So for Misty, we have the following arpeggios. If we start with the E flat major 7, we've got the E flat major 7 arpeggio there, and obviously there's many different ways to play this, but again, this isn't a harmony lesson in that sense, so we're just playing the arpeggio. So we've got the E flat, the G, the B flat, and the D up on the top, so we've got root, major 3rd, perfect 5th, and the major 7th. B flat minor 7, so we could play it in a variety of places, but I'll just play through it here. Then E flat 7, then to A flat major 7. Okay, so same as that E flat major 7, but on the A flat, then A flat minor 7, D flat 7, E flat major 7, C minor 7, F minor 7, B flat 7, then G minor 7, C 7, F minor 7, B flat 7, and so on. So we repeat that. We've also got a D flat 7 in there. Then for the B section, we've got the B flat minor 7, then the E flat 7, A flat major 7. Then for the A minor 7, D7, and then it's just the same chords that we've already looked at, just in the same kind of order, okay? So you just need to learn your arpeggios. I will list these in the lesson material, so just click on the link in the info below if you want to see them. But like I say, you really need to look at some other lessons, learning what those arpeggios are. I mean, there's not that many to look at here. We've just got the major 7, the minor 7, and the dominant 7, and then you just build them from each of those root notes. But as you can see, you know, it's a fair bit of practice for you there, and if you haven't learned your arpeggios and you don't know anything about chord tones, this is where you begin to see the value of it. So next, let's apply some of these notes. The first go-to note in the chord is obviously the root notes, which we've already covered. The next note is the 5th, and then the 3rd, and then the 7th, but we generally only use the 7th in moving between close chords because of its proximity to the root note. So let's start with the 5th. All of the chords in Misty here contain a basic perfect 5th, okay? So if you were on a C, a perfect 5th would be the G, okay? So that's just that 5th interval. So we can take the 5th of each chord, and then we can just add them above or below to add some interest. So remember, if we're going to play the 5th from C, the G, we can either play it above or we could play it below, okay? So there are a bunch of different ways that you can make use of 5ths. So I might start on the E flat there and then just place the 5th on the 3rd. So 1, 2, maybe play the root after. You could, if let's say that we're on the A flat there, I could play, so root, 5th root, or on the 2 beat per chords, I could play the B flat to the E flat, just alternate with the 5th, so B flat, so it's root, 5th root, and then the next root. Okay, so you can just place the roots and 5ths in there. I mean, obviously, you're really going to want for the root on beat 1, but then you can just pad it out there with the 5ths without worrying about it being too dissonant. So let's have a listen to how that sounds with the first section of the track. Next, we can make use of the 3rd. This is where knowing the chord tones really comes into play. Major chords and dominant 7s are going to have a major 3rd, and minor 7 chords are going to have a minor 3rd. So you really want to know about your intervals as well. You want to know major 3rds and minor 3rds. So if we're going to add some 3rds in there, away from the track, we could play the E flat there. Just try adding the 3rd, the G there into the mix. So Now on the B flat, we can add the D flat, the minor third. And then we've got the G for the E flat, so up to the A flat. And then A flat, we've got the minor third. D flat, we're going to have the F, which is the major third. So you always just have to know which third you're looking at for which chord. You know, the D flat 7 is going to have the major third. The A flat minor 7, that's going to have the minor third. So let's have a listen to that with the track. Now, like I said before, sevenths are a little less common when using them in this kind of way. So before moving into scales and the functional harmony side of things, let's have a look at a couple of other things to try in creating some melodic movement. Now, most of the melodic motion that you're going to look at is going to be in approach, okay? So approach notes into the next chord. So if I take the first chord, E flat major 7 as an example, and we look to approach to the B flat minor 7 in the next bar, for the first approach, let's try a diatonic approach, so one that's in key. Each approach note is going to use notes relative to that next chord. So in approaching a B flat minor 7, we use notes based on that B flat minor 7. An approach note is going to be a note above or below that next chord. So for that B flat, we're going to be looking at either a C of some sort, you know, one of the notes just above here, or we're going to be looking at an A of some sort, somewhere down here. Now the seventh of the chord is going to be used if we're approaching from below, and the second of the chord, or the chord scale, is going to be used in approaching from above. So with all of these chords in here, we don't have to worry about minor seconds in there. We're always going to be looking at things a major second above, pretty much. So for that B flat, we can either approach from a whole step above, which is 2 frets, or we can approach from the seventh of the chord. So in this case, a B flat minor 7 is going to be a minor 7, so it's going to be a whole step below, which is going to be the A flat leading into it. Okay. If we then lead into the E flat, the chord there is an E flat 7. So if we're going to lead in from below the seventh of the chord, it's going to be a minor 7. It's going to be a whole step below. So we're going to use the D flat leading into the E flat. And like I said, we're using the major second, a whole step above to lead in from above. But with the A flat major 7, if we want to approach that, if we want to approach it from below, the chord scale there is going to either be A flat major or A flat Lydian. So think about the chord itself, it's a major 7. It's going to be using the major 7, which is a half step below. So we're going to lead in from a half step below, or again, a whole step above, okay? Now, I know on the face of it, that might sound a little bit confusing, talking about the difference between chord scales and, you know, the key and the arpeggios and all of that stuff in approaching. It's very, very straightforward. We're just approaching from a note in the key, okay? So all I'm going to do now is just work again through that first part of the track and just listen to some of the approaches that I use. So these are diatonic approaches, and I'll do above and below. From below. The seventh of the chord. Now from above. Each time it's just a whole step above. Straightforward. So that's one way of approaching chords, but another really great way of linking the chords is through chromatic approach. And this is actually a little bit easier than diatonic approach. This is where we pretty much ignore everything about the chord tones and scales and just approach from either a half step above or below, or more commonly with a double chromatic approach by approaching with 2 notes, a whole step and half step above or below. So for a single chromatic approach note, all we're going to do is, let's say we're on the E flat and we're going to approach the B flat. Let's say we're going to approach it there at the 6th fret of the E string. We're just going to approach it from either a fret above or a fret below. That's it. So we're going to be approaching the 6th fret on the E string, so we can approach it with either the B at the 7th fret or the A at the 5th fret. So I could play, or I could play, okay, and if I played it a little bit higher, just so that you get a bit of a different sound of it, or, okay, now on the face of it, that can sound a little bit dissonant, but when played in context, in passing, you don't get that at all. It just leads in quite nicely, and it has a little bit of a jazz vibe to it as well. For double chromatic approach, we just approach with 2 notes from above or below. So if I was to approach that B flat again, at the 6th fret of the E string, I could approach from the C, just down like that, C, B, B flat, or approach from below, A flat, A natural. That's all it is, just go up 2 frets either side and then just approach. Or you can hear how cool it sounds straight away, you know. Or, okay, so now let's have a listen to some of those single and double chromatic approaches with the track. So first we'll just try single approach into the B flat. Double approach. So obviously, that's taking it a little bit to the extreme. You would never want to just work through the whole progression playing double approaches, double approaches and even single approaches like that. You know, I'm really hammering home with them. But you know, to just place them in every now and then, and actually develop a vocabulary of these things. You want to know what it sounds like to play just a straight fifth in there, root fifth, root third. What it sounds like to put in a single chromatic approach, what it sounds like to do a double chromatic approach, what it sounds like for a diatonic approach. You want to be able to know what they sound like and be able to just make use of them when you feel like it. So now let's move on to how we might make use of scales. Now, in determining what we can use from a scalar perspective, we have to do a little more digging into the harmony because we're looking to use notes that are indirectly stated in the progression. The chord tones are the chord tones. You know, you see a C major 7, we know the chord tones are C, E, G, and B. It says what the chord is on the page, but it doesn't say C major scale or C Lydian scale, you know, or D Dorian scale or E, you know, Phrygian scale. We have to understand a little about harmony to work this stuff out. And even then, this stuff is not completely set in stone. A lot of it comes down to personal preference. So we're going to want to analyze the progression a little and see what's going on. Now again, the ins and outs of functional harmony are a little outside the scope of this lesson, but I'll give you a brief overview of what we're going to be looking at here. The first thing that we look at is the key. So we've got 3 flats, which is either going to be E flat major or C minor. The first chord is E flat, and the rest of the piece tends to resolve to E flat. So we can safely say, yes, we're in E flat major. And in case you don't know the diatonic chords within a major scale, it's worth looking at some of the lessons that I have on here on YouTube. But basically, we have this set of 7th chords in the key of E flat. We have chord 1, E flat major 7, then we've got chord 2, F minor 7, then we've got chord 3, G minor 7, chord 4, A flat major 7, chord 5, B flat 7, chord 6 is C minor 7, and then for chord 7 it's D minor 7 flat 5. So armed with that knowledge, we can work through the chords and kind of label them by number where possible. So I'll try to be quick with this analysis, and you'll hopefully find some information worth investigating further, because you know, you can't always just add numbers to these things. They don't always match up, because in most tunes, especially jazz tunes, you're going to have chromatic things going on, and there's going to be secondary dominance, there's going to be little modulations, there's going to be all kinds of things. So I'll just give you a very quick analysis. So we begin with a basic E flat major 7 chord, which obviously in the key of E flat is chord 1, so very straightforward. But then immediately in part 2 we've got something that isn't in the key. We've got B flat minor 7 and E flat 7. B flat in the key of E flat should be B flat 7, but this isn't. It's B flat minor 7, and E flat should be E flat major, but no, we've got E flat 7. So don't worry. That's just basically a 2-5 chord progression. When you see something like that, you know, a minor 7 to a dominant 7, when moving by fourth, that's generally a 2-5 in A flat major. Now we haven't modulated. I know I said it's a 2-5 in A flat. What that actually is an expansion on an E flat 7. Okay, so we've switched the E flat major to an E flat 7 to lead nicely into the A flat. And we've expanded on that using a 2-5. Now, just as a little quick bit of a tip for when you're analysing harmony, you can use 2-5 progressions to expand on a 5. So every time you see something like an E flat 7, you could replace it or substitute it with a 2-5. So for an E flat 7, you can play, E flat 7, you can play B flat minor 7 and E flat 7. Okay? So that's just a 2-5 expansion on E flat 7, which is in turn a secondary dominant chord in E flat leading into A flat. So yeah, it all sounds a bit complicated, but it really isn't. All that is E flat major, then switching to an E flat 7, secondary dominant, which leads us nicely into the A flat. It's just a little chromatic alteration to lead us into the A flat, and we've just expanded on it with a 2-5. So now we're on the A flat major 7, so we're on chord 4. Okay, so that's in key, that's fine. Then for the next bar, again, we're moving into the chromatic territory. We've got A flat minor 7 and D flat 7, and you think, okay, well, what the hell is that? So A flat minor 7, again, that's not in the key. What we've got here is another little 2-5, okay, but not in E flat. So a little 2-5 there. This would normally be in G flat, but this isn't. What this D flat is something called a backdoor cadence into E flat. So if you look at the D flat 7 there, what's the next chord? It's E flat major 7. So every time you see a dominant 7 chord on what is basically the flat 7 of the key, in this case D flat, it leads into, via voice leading into the E flat in a certain way. It just has a certain sound, okay? So you get this in a lot of tunes, a lot of jazz tunes. And some people will say that that's actually borrowing from the parallel minor, you know, however you want to analyze it. They call it a backdoor cadence. It's the flat 7 chord in the key, even though we're in a major key, it's just leading back in. So we're expanding on that dominant 7 there with a 2-5. So A flat minor 7 to D flat 7 into the E flat, okay? And that works nicely because we were on chord 4 and we wanted to get from chord 4 back to chord 1, okay? So it uses a backdoor cadence to do it. Then for the next 4 bars, it's all pretty straightforward. We've got E flat major 7 to C minor 7, which is chord 6 in the key, then F minor 7, chord 2 in the key, B flat 7, so that's just a basic 1-6-2-5 turnaround that you'll get all the time in pretty much everything. So that's 1-6-2-5. Okay, so it's just stepping stones back to the tonic. But instead of landing on chord 1, we move to the G minor 7, chord 3, so we can start that stepping stone back again with a turnaround. So again, this is going to be a turnaround using 2-2-5. So we're still in the key, but we've got the G minor 7, then we move to C7, secondary dominant chord. We've turned a minor 7 into a dominant 7, and then F minor 7 to B flat 7 there in the key. So that's a 3, 6, 2, 5. You'll see that a lot in jazz chord progressions as well. It's just a turnaround, okay? Just to get us back to E flat, okay? So that C7 should be a C minor 7 in the key, but instead we've turned it into a secondary dominant just to turn this into a 2-5. In jazz, you'll see loads of 2-5s. You get 2-5, 2-5, 2-5, 2-5. So switch it to a 2-5, which leads us nicely into the F minor, you know, so we're getting this cascading 2-5s working down, and you do it with all... You get all these kind of cascading 2-5s. That's all it is. On the repeat of that A section, we have the E flat to the D flat 7. So we're on the E flat, and then we go to D flat 7 to bring us back to the E flat major 7. So again, that's that backdoor cadence. E flat to D flat 7. So if I played it up here, okay. So it's just to send it off a little bit with a certain type of vibe there. Then we're into B flat minor 7 to E flat 7 to A flat major 7. So all of that is basically A flat major. We've kind of modulated into A flat major. We are still in E flat major, to be fair, but we've just moved to the subdominant area. So instead of a full modulation, you wouldn't use a key change for this. It's just we've moved into that area, and so we're using a B flat minor 7, E flat 7, 2-5 in the A flat major to bring it round. So again, B flat major, E flat 7 to A flat major 7, okay? Then we have this very strange little move to A minor 7 to D7. So we've just taken that A flat major, we've just moved up a half step, which gives us this quite odd little sound. But again, all that is a 2-5 progression to get us into G minor, chord 3, for our little stepping stone back to E flat. So even though it looks very chromatic there, it really isn't. It's just a simple way of getting to that G minor and working our way back, okay? So it's not that complicated, this tune, but on the face of it, if all you were going to do is analyze it with numbers, and then you'd see that the numbers, you know, they don't match up, it can be a little confusing if you're just looking at it diatonically. But the minute that you start understanding what backdoor cadences are, what 2-5 expansions are on a dominant 7, it all starts to make a lot more sense, and you just start seeing these general areas of chord 1 and chord 4, pretty much. So obviously, a lot of you are going to listen to all that analysis that I just did and think, what the hell is he talking about? It can just sound like a lot of theoretical waffle, but what it does do is it makes you realize how you might analyze some of this stuff, and might make you move on to a little bit of harmony study so that you can understand that, because trust me, that's not a difficult tune to analyze. The things that I'm talking about there, I know it can sound like a bit of theoretical snobbery, but you know, I ain't no theoretical snob. It's actually not that difficult. You just have to know a few little things, and then it all starts making sense. And then all of a sudden, you might start understanding why certain scales are used over certain chords, how the chords work, why that chord leads into that, you know, all of that stuff. So as much as I can't really get into the nuts and bolts of a lot of that theory in this lesson because it'd take way too long, I would certainly, if you're into that, just have a look at some harmony, maybe some harmony lessons online, or check out some of my other lessons on the channel. So now we know a little more about the chords in there, we can assign some chord scales. Now again, I'm not going to go too much into what these scales are. I'll just give you a basic rundown of possible scales in this tune so you can investigate further with the lessons here on YouTube or on the Talkingbass website. So one thing to be aware of when you're looking at scales versus the chord tones and the arpeggios is that really all we're adding is 3 extra notes into the mix. So if we look at, let's say, the first chord, the E flat major 7, if you already know the chord tones in there, we know the E flat major major 7 arpeggio in there, we've got the root, we've got the major 3rd, the perfect 5th, and the major 7th. If we were to play an E flat major scale there as the basic chord scale, the only notes we're adding in there are the 2nd, the 4th, and the 6th. So we're adding the 2nd, the 4th, and the 6th, which you can see as extensions of the chord. But when you actually look to add these notes in there, really, you're going to be working around the chord tones. That's the framework. So don't worry too much about the scales, because you know you can use chromatic notes if you want to, but you're going to have those arpeggios are going to be your framework. Then the second, the sixth, and the fourth there are just going to be things that you use to join up those chord tones. So it just gives you a better, in learning what these chord scales are, just gives you a better idea of which ones are going to work over certain chords, which sixth you're going to use when moving between the fifth and the seventh, you know, and which second you're going to use when you use a diatonic approach. Stuff like that. You're just looking at the second, the fourth, and the sixth. So I'll just run through the chords in quick succession, telling you which scales you can use. So over the E flat major 7, we're on chord 1, so you have the choice. You can either use E flat major, or you can use E flat Lydian. A lot of people like to use Lydian because there's less of a clash with the fourth and the third in there, so that's going to have the sharp and fourth in there. Okay, but both of them are just working around a major 7. B flat minor 7 and the E flat 7, it's a 2-5. We're going to be using B flat Dorian in there. Then E flat 7, we use E flat Mixolydian. So that's a major scale with a flattened 7th. A flat major 7, it's chord 4. You can use A flat major because in effect we kind of modulated briefly, so we're kind of in A flat, you know, temporarily, but you can use A flat Lydian as well. Then for the A flat minor 7 and D flat 7, for the A flat minor 7, remember it's a 2 pretty much, so we're going to use A flat Dorian. And then for the D flat 7, those backdoor cadences, whenever you see one of those, you want to use a Lydian dominant scale, which is basically, you can see as a Lydian scale with a flat 7, or you can see it as a Mixolydian scale with a sharpened 4th. So on the D flat there, so it's got the sharpened 4th and the flat 7. So root, major 2nd, major 3rd, sharpened 4th or augmented 4th, perfect 5th, major 6th, and then minor 7. Okay, so that's the Lydian dominant scale, which is a mode of the melodic minor, and you can use that on the backdoor cadences, so for the D flat 7. For the 1-6-2-5 progression, you can just use the basic modes in there, so for E flat major 7, E flat major. C minor 7, it's C Aeolian or natural minor. So it's got the flat 6 in there. F minor 7, F Dorian, because it's chord 2. And then B flat 7, it's B flat Mixolydian, because it's chord 5. Then we move on to that little turnaround at the end. So the G minor 7 is chord 3, so we use Phrygian, because that's the 3rd mode. So we've got that. So we've got the little minor 2nd in there, so that's always worth noting. And then the C7, it's a secondary dominant on chord 6. We use pretty much a Mixolydian flat 6 for that. So just think of a Mixolydian scale, which is a major scale with a flat 7, and flatten the 6. So we've got the A flat there. And then F Dorian, B flat Mixolydian. So that's the chord scales for that first part. Then on the second time bar, we have the D flat 7 again, backdoor cadence, Lydian dominant for the D flat. Then when we move on to the B flat minor 7 to E flat 7 to A flat major 7, 2-5-1. So it's just B flat minor 7 is B flat Dorian, E flat 7 is E flat Mixolydian, and then A flat major 7. We can use major or Lydian. Then when we switch to A minor 7, we can use the A Dorian, because we're making another little modulation here, and then D7, we've got the Mixolydian, and then we're on to the G minor again, which is the Phrygian. You could actually, on the D7, you could actually use the Mixolydian flat 6 again, so that it leads into the minor a little bit more, so it's, you know, we're kind of moving into G minor territory, and then it's all the same scales for all of those chords. Now, obviously, again, this all sounds like theory bunk, you know, it's just a load of scale names. So if you don't know anything about modes or scales or anything like that, again, that'll just sound like a load of, like I say, just a load of bunk. But if you do know those, it's going to give you the knowledge of which seconds, fourths, and sixths you can use diatonically or that'll fit over the chromatic chords there. So it just gives you that option. You don't have to memorize all those chords and start thinking in terms of chord scales. You basically just work around the chord tones, add in the chromatic approach notes, things like that. But if you really want to use a chord to create either a fill or lead into something, maybe using scalar motion, it's nice to know whether you should be using a major sixth or a minor sixth, whether you should be using a major second or a minor second, and whether you want an augmented fourth in there. So that's where this comes in. If you're going to be soloing over it, that's a different thing entirely. Then you really are going to want to know what the chord scales are. You want to know everything about the landscape of it. But for just making bass lines, you can just get away with the chord tones. So now I'll just work through the song again, adding a few melodic lines based on some of those chord scales. So I'm going to be approaching some of the chords, working up through the scale, maybe descending through the scale, things like that. And I'm going to be way busier here than I would normally, on a laid-back ballad, but you will get to hear some of the sounds available. If you're going to be playing like this, on a gig, let's say, you wouldn't want to play like this, but it's something that you can put in there, just, maybe a little bit more sparing, just to add a bit of interest. So now we've covered a bunch of topics like chord tones, harmonic analysis, chromatic approach, chord scales, and all the tips on learning the notes on the neck. Like I said, even a simple ballad like Misty can be a great vehicle for improving every aspect of your musicianship. Remember to like the video and leave a comment to let me know what kind of other topics you'd like me to cover. Also subscribe to the channel and hit that bell, and then check out all of the lesson material over at the Talkingbass website. Okay? I'll see you next week.